Guys, thank you so much for joining me today on the dad's message to his kids. Right now, I have a wonderful man, a good friend of mine, David Yudis. He's a colleague that I met at a coaching seminar. And David, you carry yourself in such an awesome way, and just even the some of the advice you've given me on some of our coaching calls, like with our group, it felt very like, oh man, like this guy has my back. But it's almost what is it called, like a big brother kind of thing, like, hey, I noticed you're pretty hesitant here, let's go there, let's see what you got. Very encouraging. Those are the biggest things that I remember, or the biggest feelings that I have when I think about you, is like, oh, this guy has my back, he challenges me, but it's a challenge in like, oh, I know you can do better, I know you're afraid, but let's keep moving forward. And again, I wanted to have David on here, introduce you guys to him, ask him some questions. David, thank you so much for being here, man.
Andres, it's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And you know what? I do have your back, but do you know why? Because I feel and I believe that you have mine, Andres. It's a two-way street. And as much as you might learn anything from me, I'm learning from you. And I appreciate that. And I'd say that's a first kind of, lesson, connect, takeaway, insight. I think when it's a two-way street, we can go anywhere.
On that, man. David, tell me, how many kids do you have? What are their names?
I have two children. My son is Gabriel and my daughter is Blossom, like a flower.
Nice. What is your happiest memory so far as a dad?
Wow. Have you asked everyone that question, Andres? I have no idea that I could even label it to one memory. There are probably so many across their lives. But I'll go back even actually before they were born, Andres, and two quick ones that come up. And both of them are the same at different times, but it's this. When we found out that my wife was pregnant and we were going to have our first child, that was a happiest moment of my life. And then the second time around, even more so. And here's why. So we always knew we wanted to have a few children if we could. And we had my son, and my wife actually got sick, and it delayed us being able to try and grow our family. We weren't sure how that was going to turn out. She actually was able to recover health-wise. And so we were actually able to have my daughter a little later than we thought we would. But when that happened, after her being sick, really felt like it was a gift.
Wow, that's awesome. And,
Yeah.
and I'm curious. So I love that you have two kids, not so much because, it's two, it's more like I can ask this question about each of them. Last night, I interviewed a man who had five kids. Like, okay, like this is kind of tough to do each one. But I'm curious, what is your proudest moment so far with each of your kids?
And just so we're clear, I didn't prepare, Andres. So I'm not sitting here with rote. You're catching me literally in the moment, sort of thinking that through.
Yeah, I love it.
I'd like to say that my proudest moment is watching them grow. And I guess I'll think about that in certain milestones. I think childhood's a tough thing. Maybe some kids grow up and they have a great childhood and it's easy, but I think I'm a psychologist. And so, I look at developmental stages and I don't think there is any stage that's easy. I think we've got, and it's purposeful, right? As human beings, it's purposeful. We move through developmental stages, and that doesn't matter who we are as an individual. Even if we're delayed, we grow over time in our own ways individually. To watch my children have moved through developmental stages in their own way has been very rewarding. But to be more specific than that, I'll say, watching one of them finish school, high school specifically, really proud moment for me, because in a way, it was a culmination of so much work and effort on my part, my wife's part, our family's part, but more importantly, on my child's part. And now my daughter kind of coming around and almost getting to that same point. it's a launching into the world where they as an individual are going off to be their own individual. And that's a major transition. So it's a bittersweet moment. It's a wonderful moment or a wonderful memory to me in the sense of them having grown and achieved that, happy, but it's bittersweet at the same time because it's a change. They're stepping into their own self, if you will.
My friend, that reminds me of something my friend Paul once said. Like he coaches dad in his own way too, and like his things like, I have kind of like 18 years to like teach my kid how to be a good man, how to be a good person. And yeah, it's like not gonna, it doesn't end at 18, but it's more like that's a concentrated amount of time because they're going to be at the house pretty much for that amount of time. And I think it's so powerful, just as the way you illustrated that. It's like, yeah, it's not just them graduate, it's not them just accomplishing something, it's just they're taking those steps to be an adult, a man and a woman in society. And I think that that's so cool. I didn't think of it that way until you illustrated it that way. Now I'm
And
curious. Yeah.
I know your mission, Andres, and I really respect it. I think it's a great mission with the work that you're doing right now. And it makes me think, I watched a film recently, and in the film, I'm watching a main character who gets back in touch with his daughter. His daughter's probably in her mid-20s, and he's much later in life. I don't know, maybe he's in his 50s. But there's been a real gap there, meaning I don't think, first of all, I think he was kind of not around much as his daughter grew up, and he comes back and he's trying to get back in touch with her because he's facing some challenges in his own life. And I think he's being somewhat reflective, and maybe easier said than actually done. But I do believe this. I don't think it's ever too late to try and reconnect, ever.
Yeah.
It takes effort, it takes risk, it takes courage, but there's always, biologically, if you're a parent and you're a child and vice versa, there's some connection there. And there's always the opportunity to try and reconnect while both people are still alive and on earth. And I think even when you've done the 18 years, as you said, your friend was sharing, because I think there's a lot of truth to that too for many people, try to do everything and put everything you can into it for those 18 years. And then that person goes off as their own individual. Even then, there are things, lots of times, that don't go right, don't go well. And there's always times to revisit and kind of continue on. Relationship develops.
100%. I think it's, to add to your point, like it's like I've mentioned it on several episodes, like my relationship with my dad, like it just wasn't like he wasn't there, and like I was missing that. But I would say like he just always wanted to connect, and like it was limited. He lived in Colombia. This was before, you know, if you're a Gen Z person or anything, you don't know this, but there weren't cell phones before. There were no WhatsApp is a common app.
Really? That didn't exist?
Yeah, or at least not to this extent. And like, so we had calling cards, and it would be, you'd pay for $1 calling card, and you would get Orbitel. That was one that we would get, and then you would call for an hour to Colombia. And I remember as a kid, I was like, why are we always the ones getting this? Like, why don't they get it? And like my mom rationalized it, like, look, like they're in Colombia, it's much more expensive to do that. So like, okay, but like even now, like I'm 30 years old. This was probably a 25-year-old conversation. And it just still feels like, why didn't they call? And it's just like yeah, he would be persistent. He kept reaching out, kept connecting. And like you said, it's a two-way street. Both people have to want it. And maybe the dad does want it, but the kid's gotta want it too. And sometimes the only way a kid will want it is if dad proves it over and over and over again. So if you're listening to this and this is you, I will say my relationship with my dad is, we have a relationship now, but it's because he was persistent despite me ignoring him for a year, despite me not answering his calls, or despite me giving him nonchalant answers, or just being angry. And it's still a process that I'm going through myself, but like David said, it's a two-way street, and be persistent. So I love that we tapped into that. Yeah.
It's a great experiential reflection. Here's mine, Andre. So I did grow up with my dad. My dad was around, but he had to work. He was working. I mean, all the time. He kind of came from a family that was hard workers, and that's just what you did. But he built his own thing. And so there was a lot of the time when he wasn't around. And I don't mean because he didn't want to be around or because he was absentee. He was working. That's what he did. And that was part of what he did for the family. And there were times when I wish he would have been around a little bit more. But it's interesting. I think about what's one's experience, like what did I experience in this particular case? And there's also intent. And I do think intent from a context perspective, intent and experience did line up here for me. I knew the intent was he was working to build something so that he could ultimately provide. And I understood that. Doesn't mean I loved it all the time. Doesn't mean I was even okay with it most of the time. Doesn't mean that I didn't want him around more of the time. But I think I understood it. I understood maybe his own reasoning and what he built. And it did provide something that, possibility, opportunity, some level of material, substance, security, stability that wouldn't have been there had he not. And so I can really appreciate that on one level. But if we go back and you time machine us back and we go talk to the kid growing up, he'd probably say, Andres, no, I want my dad around more. I want to go play ball, or I want to go run in the streets, or I want my dad to play a game with me, or I want my dad to read a story with me. And again, I feel very fortunate and lucky. I think my dad was around, but he wasn't around a lot of the time too, as I say, because he was working. But because of that, we still have a pretty special relationship today. One that we can kick things around, something that I really appreciate.
That's all. And I think you hit on something that I've kind of stumbled into myself too. Like, again, so you and I both know what you focus on is what you get. That's your reality. So for me, like, if I were to look back, I'm like, yeah, I wanted more time with my dad. I didn't want my dad to be, when I visited Colombia, like, I didn't want him to be taking me to see his friends and just kind of like to me, if I think about it, like, yeah, it's an endearing thing. He wants his friends to know me. Like, he cares about me so much. He talks about me all the time. I hear it from his friends, but I was like, I wanted that time with my dad. Like, I didn't want to talk about business or anything. Like I wanted time with my dad. And then I think about myself now, and my wife, Maria, she has this cousin. He's 5 years old now. And him and I, like, we play around like it's almost like I feel like I can be his big brother, like we can play around. But it's like that common thing, like, hey, like, it's awesome to, like, I love your kids, mostly because they don't stay with me. And then during the holidays, we've been staying with her aunt for, I don't know, maybe 5 days now. And by day 2 or 3, I was kind of like, yeah, like, I don't want to play right now. I don't want to hang out right now. Like, why are you being so annoying? Especially, like, sometimes kids could just be rude. Like, kids are just rude. And then I started thinking, like, my focus right now is, I don't want to spend time. Like, I want to be coaching. I want to be learning. I want to be growing my business. Same thing with Maria. Like, when she's at school, like, I'm just focused on that. She has time off. I'm like, all right, but I don't want to hang out right now. Like, I want to focus on my business. And I want to focus on my business because it's for you. And it's like, now I kind of have these two perspectives. Like, yeah, I'm the kid who wants that time, but now I'm also that man who wants to focus on the work that provides for my family, or that certain, like, it's another form of love. And it's like, I see myself not flip flopping, but kind of like turning on the switch for both. And I'm seeing those two perspectives better. It gives me a better understanding for my dad. And just the conversations with him has helped too. But it's so interesting that you said that, because it's like, oh man, I just love it.
It makes me think, Andres, a little bit about something that I've seen come up a lot in life and in work, which is the idea of quantity and quality, right? Mm. And I think, again, if we time machine and we go back and you interview the kid in me, the kid would say, yeah, I don't care. I want the time. Like, I want my dad around as much as possible. I want to go do all sorts of things, and I'd like him to be around, right? Mm-hmm. And so maybe I'd say, as a kid, quantity matters. It's totally important. I don't care about anything. Because if I get the time, we'll make quality. Maybe, and maybe as a kid. again, looking back with a retrospective lens, the idea of quality, though, really matters. And I do think that's something that as adults, we can practice a little bit more. Sometimes we can't always give the quantity. I mean, look, I think it's our choice. You know, it's our free will to decide if we want to give the time, we will. But we got responsibilities, you got to do all sorts of things. So we make choice, and maybe quantity is impinged upon. And so we can't give as much time as we might want. But if the quality is there, that can be very profound. So it's something I've tried to focus or instill to pass on the quality of time that I give. And when I'm there, I try to be there. I think that counts. Presence matters.
I love that. You're the first man who's mentioned that kind of distinctions. I appreciate that. And well, I'm curious, what's the flip side of this? What is your biggest regret as a dad?
You know, it's funny, right? Like we say, greatest strength can also be greatest weakness. And I will just flip that. Yeah, there are times when I think it's also like a genetic pattern almost. It gets passed down. So my father was hard at work trying to build his business. You've talked about building your business. Same, you know, I've gone through, I feel like several careers over my time thus far. But even when I was internal in an organization, I gave a lot of myself. My work to me is really important. It's part of who I am. And probably that I got from growing up and my familial relationship, my relationship to my dad, mimicking it, seeing that pattern. But I will say this, it was my choice. I didn't have to give extra time or give all the time that I did. I wanted to. I thrived on it. It gave me energy. It gave me self-worth. It gave me feelings of achievement. Those were good feelings. And ultimately, I think that played back to what I could give to my family. However, you asked biggest regret, I probably could have done less and still come out with just as much as I did. And so to some degree, I probably overinvested. Let me make a commitment on that. That's not fair. I overinvested. I didn't probably overinvest. I overinvested. And so I do wish, looking back, I could see that and know, hey, I could probably give half as much time and still put, to use what I said, the quality over the quantity. If I gave it full quality, I could have given half the time. And if I spent half more of that time back with my family, that's a regret I missed, because time keeps moving and your kids grow up and you get older and things change, and that's constant. But in the moment, I personally can get caught up. Just wait. Let me just answer one more question, Andres. Hold on. Don't move on yet. Let me just, one more. Let me just give you a couple more points. Let me get it right. Right. So hold on. Maybe a little bit more, let go.
So you mean, just to clear, like overinvestment in time with the work?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm definitely, I think the more that I talk about this, because our work is just, it's important to us. We're like, I've definitely noticed, and that's a human thing. I don't think it's just a man or woman thing. Like, I know for me, my work, the stuff that I do, how I serve, is just so important to me. It's a part of me. It's the way that I love to show up in. But I think that skill of balance is just, it's a nuanced skill that is very, I don't think it's talked about enough. And I think it's something like, definitely something for like a great dad, I think really has that skill developed, or at least like they have a baseline and they're getting better and better and better at it. Like I don't know if you've seen this. Like there's like I got trapped in like the social media kind of like go through things for a whole hour, and like, oh wow, I didn't know an hour passed. But there's an awful video out there where they're trying to be motivating. I get the intention, but like it's just awful. And it's like, yeah, like the heart, like the dad that stays at home, he loves you, but he doesn't provide. He stays at home. So that's what, and the dad who isn't home, he has to work. He loves you too. And it's like, it's almost like you got to pick one or the other. And I'm like, that is such a pigeonhole belief. And I really dislike that video, because it's like, yeah, these are your options. And it's like, no, that's
maybe
not.
it's a miss sometimes to think about how we define it too. you,
Yeah.
me, we, people. But it's work to be at home too, right? It's different kind of work. And I don't mean that work is good, actually. I think work is part of being human. I think that's what's made people who they are over time. There's a purpose there. And one, if it's one's purpose to help raise their family to be who they want them to be or be the best that they can be, then that's meaningful, right? And so sometimes I think if what I'm doing is driven to my ultimate purpose in life, what I'm trying to achieve, it's not an excuse, but then that's okay if I'm making a choice to do certain things, whether it's focus at home or focus on a job or a task. But if it's part of the bigger mission, then it can have more meaning to it. But it's also to take it in doses, I guess. There's the big picture, but the day really matters. This day is not coming back. So can I spend this day with my family? Yeah. And can I be there with my family if I'm choosing to do that? Or am I spending the day with my family, but my head is off really doing work in my head, thinking that I should be doing whatever else it is I'm doing. So I'm body physically there, but I'm not there. I might as well not be there.
Yeah, I had to catch myself. It's something that I noticed that was an ugly thing that I noticed about myself was not about myself. I'm not going to judge myself in that way. I think it's more like it's just an ugly habit that I noticed that I picked up was again, like Maria's free. She's not at school. She's not studying. She's not normally she's 9 to 11 p.m. Like, okay, like now I got some time with her. And I noticed I'm on my phone. And I'm just checking, like, oh man, let me look at this comic. Let me read this. Oh, let me catch up on some movie news. Or like, oh, but like this is and my excuse is like, look, I worked all day. Like, I want some time for myself. It's like, yeah, but like again, how can I fill each of these important cups?
That's so fair, and I'm with you 100%. Sometimes my family will say, I'm like, yeah, I'm here. I'm at the table. What's the problem? You're on your phone. I am? Oh, well, I was just check. Yeah, I was just checking something. No. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. So really good sometimes to now that didn't exist when I grew up, right? Because so there were no phones. To your point, you were saying WhatsApp wasn't around. I actually knew that. I was smiling, Andres. But right, so there weren't even mobile phones that you could have at the table like that. And so, but that doesn't mean there weren't other distractions, right? I
Oh
don't know,
yeah.
maybe it was television or
Yeah.
music in the background, whatever. Um, but it still is something you have to commit to.
It's funny. I just realized this now. Just looking back, like even it was me, my mom, my sister growing up. They're like we're not going to talk. Like there's nothing. I don't want to talk about my feeling. Like I don't want to talk about anything. I would purposely turn on the TV from the kitchen table, and I would just watch TV while we ate, and I would turn it off sometimes because my mom was like, no, like we're not going to do it that way. But it's like that was just a go-to thing. Another like you can say anything that you want about today's day and age. The habits and behaviors of today are still they're the same that we've had since we lived in caves. Like distraction is still distraction.
Yeah.
20 years from now, 5 years from now, it's going to be something else. I love that, man. And tell me, what is something that you grew up with, how your mom or dad or even both of them raised you that you're doing with your kids? What is something that you're kind of mimicking in your childhood that you've been passing on to your kids?
Something that I think again I saw in both my parents growing up and in different ways, and the way they would express this would be different. And I don't even know if it was a purposeful conversation as much it was not maybe said, but I could see it and it transfers in that way. It's this to instill that we have an opportunity to make a difference. Now, what or how that will be is up to each one of us. I have a couple siblings, so each one of us might do that in a different way and express it in a different way. But the opportunity to make a difference with what you might go out there and be or do in the world is something that's important. So I felt I got that from my parents. I think that's a really important freedom that we have in our country and in our life. And that's something that I've tried to instill with my wife into our children.
what about the flip of that? What is an upgrade that you're doing from how you grew up that you're doing differently with your kids?
Yeah, I paused for a moment to think about that. I don't know if it's an upgrade, but maybe it's a reaction to how I think I experienced. So maybe you'd call it an upgrade, but you know, in my family, it was a little bit more open. Who might you be? Where do you want to go? It's open, right? So one of my mom was creative. And so, there's like that, hey, you can kind of figure it out and be or do whatever you want to do. If you go out there and figure it out and go find it, right? Go find it, go make it happen, but you got to do it. So it's not like it's handed to you, but there's also not, it must be this particular path. I think my wife and I have been a little bit more, I hope I don't mean this fully, but lecturing might be too strong a word, but a little bit more directed or structured in saying, hey, you need to think about it's this track or it's this thing, or you've got to go after something that you're interested in, but something that you're interested in that you also know can support you. And while it wasn't that was left completely unstated, it was less driven as they must go together. When I grew up, it was more about, hey, you can be whoever you want to be if you go out there and make it happen. So I think we're being a little bit more specific to, yes, you can do that, but it has to be something that's going to help you survive, live on your own, support yourself, better society. But you can't just do something that doesn't bring something back to you in the same way, or otherwise you're not going to be able to support your own family. And I think that's, I don't know if you call it an upgrade, but it's been just a little bit more of a directed push is how I'd say it.
Mm-hmm. Well, so with your kids, like, what would you say has been the result of that? So like you've done that, like how is that, like, how are they showing up due
So
to that?
my son, like many kids, I think, at one point in time was like, I'm going to be an athlete, loved sports, loved to play, loved to watch, and wanted to be an athlete. And so I certainly wouldn't want to have shut that down. I think that's great. Competition, wanting to win, drive to compete. But the odds, and I literally showed him this statistically, I played it out, to make it as a professional athlete, it's pretty tough. Impossible? No, I don't think anything is necessarily impossible, but the odds are stacked against it. So that's okay. But let's acknowledge that. Let's just call it what it is. One in whatever it is, millions make it as a professional athlete. Then go even further than that. Even harder than that is maybe you make it as a professional athlete and maybe you do decent, you do well, you can survive, but one in even less than that become big time stars and go on. And I think that's the dream that I'm playing out there that I heard my son speak on. But instead I said, there's lots of things that somebody can do in the sports world that make you very successful, that you can live a great life and support yourself. That may not be being that one, athlete who's the known athlete more than any other, who becomes the ultimate bona fide sports star on that particular team in that particular sport. And so really being focused or opening up his thinking to, hey, if that doesn't work out, then I'm not the star athlete. Maybe it's something that supports around the team. Maybe it's working on a sports team. Maybe it's coaching. Maybe it's in marketing. Maybe it's in sales for a team. Maybe it's in sports management. That's a huge area today. That didn't even exist, I don't think, as a formal thing you could go after, study, learn, work in. Maybe you fell into it, or if your family was in that business, you got to be part of it. Today, it's big. It's a huge thing. And so it's the idea of just thinking about opening your thinking, but not killing a dream, but using that dream and thinking broader about it.
I think and I'm so happy I asked that question because, oftentimes you hear like on the other spectrum of like, yeah, freedom, like you do what you want, is like, it's my way or the highway. And it's like, this is the way to do it things because you're going to fail at this, or not that you're going to fail, but it's like, you're like, how are you going to make money off of this? How are you going to win here? And it's like, I love the nuance that you have there, because it's, I think that the service here is like maybe there's a dad listening to this who's like, maybe he's really into baseball. He's got his kid playing baseball, and the kid is like, he's almost like almost so passionate about his kid excelling at baseball that his kid ends up hating baseball. Because like, I hate how you like judge me and criticize me, like why, like, or like even with grades, like there's dads who are like, or their parents who are like I got an 89, and okay, why didn't you get a 90? Why didn't you get an A plus? It's like there's always a criticism, and I think it's like, here we got a balance of both. And I think you and I both, again, we're coaches, so we know the nuance here. Like the cool thing is like, all right, like there's evidence in the thing that you're currently doing that maybe you can do, maybe you can be a professional athlete. But what are the foundational things that you really love about athletics, and what you think you would be getting or getting more of from being a pro athlete that you can get somewhere else? It's kind of like for coaching, for me, for example, I had no idea this thing existed, life coaching. Like my wife got me a life coach shirt for
Cool.
Christmas.
I like it, Andres. You wear it well.
Thanks, man. Eyes up here, please. Eyes up here. But what is it called? She's like, I had no idea this thing existed, and I kept focusing on it because I thought it was either that or therapy or therapist, and like I was like, oh, like I don't really want to do therapist, and but it's like, wow, like I fell in love with coaching, not because it was coaching or because of what it could promise me or anything. It's more like, this is just an extension of who I am. I love supporting people. I love giving to people. I love talking to people. I love talking about this stuff with people. I love helping people achieve things. I also love helping people with some of the past stuff. It's like, oh wow, like that's how you and I connected. And I'm like, oh, wow, I love talking about this stuff with other people who are doing it well. And it's like, wow, what are the clues in this thing that I wanted? Again, if I want to be a pro athlete, what are those foundational clues that I can find elsewhere, and maybe even find it in a more whole way that I wouldn't have found it if I thought it was, because again, we're just assuming what this thing might give us. Like, oh, I wanted to be an astronaut, I think this is what it would mean to me. But it's like, oh, I don't
And
know.
what did you just say, Andres? You said my wife gave me this shirt. See, that's pretty cool to me. That's somebody believed in you. And I think that's another important takeaway. Now, we're talking about moms, dads, dads specifically here, but I think of that as whoever raised you, right? That could be anybody, but whoever somebody grew up with, whoever were those important people in their lives who raised them, helped them to grow when they weren't able to really care for themselves. If that person or persons believe in you, in what you're trying to achieve, they guide you. It doesn't mean they tell you everything you want to hear or just say, hey, you're wonderful. But if they believe in what you're trying to do, that makes a difference, I think. Just like you said, my wife gave me that says something, right? So they believe. The other thing that struck me about what you said was, so yeah, you want to be the professional athlete. I think there's a question that can come up. So when do you decide, you know what, I'm not going to be the bona fide star and make millions of dollars and be the MVP and the number one on the team. Maybe I'm not even going to actually play. Maybe I can't even make it that way. Like maybe I don't have the biological makeup to do that. Or maybe it's just the cards aren't in it for me. But at some point, I think that's where one's mission kind of comes in. And even as a kid, what's one's mission? So why do you want to be that star athlete? Whatever the answer is to that, I think can be like a beacon, like a star that kind of guides you to say, okay, I still love sports. I still love the competition. I still love being on the team. Maybe I'm not going to be, or maybe I don't even want to be anymore the star, but maybe I want to be around it. And there's something else I can do that I help the team to win in a different way, because that's part of my mission. I think that's where the idea of the mission comes in and can really help to support the dream and, drive it forward.
Oh man, you mentioned three things that I want to go, but I feel like this is like, all right, you got three roads here. Which one are you going to take? One thing I do want to tap into is like, there's something that you mentioned, like, what if I don't get the millions? What if I don't get all that attention? Where do I go next? It's like, okay, it reminds me of this TV show. There's a cartoon that I saw, but it was basically like this guy had like this firepower, and he wanted this love from his dad. His dad rejected him and considered him weak, and he like has this permanent scar on his face. And then he would tap into his anger to fuel this power that he has, and then he healed this anger, and he saw his dad for who he was, and he wasn't so much searching for that love from his dad because he knew he had that love inside of him already from his uncle, and he knew that he was worth it. His dad wasn't going to mean that he was worth it. But what he noticed was his power with the fire decreased because his anger decreased. And he had to reconnect with the real reason why he wanted to do that thing. So to me, it's like, okay, like this kid who, I want to become a pro athlete because I want to make millions. I want to get all the attention. I want to be seen as the superstar. I want to be seen as the best. What if that kid already met all of those things before he became a pro athlete? Or before he became anything? Like maybe he wants to be the richest person in his family. And what if he already met those things that he's kind of not getting met? Would he still love sports? And if he does, like, okay, that's the real reason why you're into this. Now let's see how we can continue to fuel those reasons. How can we continue to again live in that extension of yourself in another way? Because again, if you become paraplegic or if you become paralyzed or lose a limb, like, okay, maybe you can't play sports to that extent, but how can we meet that need? How can we fulfill that without the need of this thing? That's why, to me, again, the work that we do is like, how can I help you heal your relationship with your dad without your dad even being there? Like, let's heal it. Like maybe he passed away, or maybe he just doesn't want to talk about it. How can we do it without him there? And then how can we do it maybe afterwards with him there? Like it's not determined by this other. You tapped in something really cool there.
Super powerful. I agree with you. Like just that goes really deep. And I'm thinking about what you're saying. And I think the answers sometimes start right with you, or you, the individual, with each of us, right? It's right there. Because you're right. Sometimes you can't access that person anymore. They're not there. They won't talk. They're inaccessible, whatever it is. Or to your point, you get into an accident and you can't play anymore like you could. Or maybe you just don't have the talent to play and you're not good, but there's something about being around it that doesn't mean you can't be. And so that's thinking, right? And I think if we blow that up a little bit, it changes the whole paradigm.
You said, so I love the context that you brought this, but to me, something you said just brought me to another road. And it was this thing of like, I'm thinking about, okay, like what if the dad he really wants his kid to be great at this specific sport? Maybe it's football. And he pushes him and he pushes him, and they're like, why do you want him to be so good at this? Is this about him or is this more about you? And if you address that and found that out and kind of like met that and felt fulfilled there, would you still want him to be playing that sport to the level of intensity that you've been showing up? And if not, like, why would you want him to play? Maybe it's the values. Maybe it's like, okay, let's address that, so then this way we can show up to him in a whole version. And I'm going to end that road there because I do want to tap on something very interesting that you said is get them on a mission. So tell me more about that. What do you mean by getting them on a mission?
Well, let's play that out just a step further, which is, I'm actually pausing as I think about it myself. I just think mission's important. Purpose is one of the things that I think is human centric. We all, if we identify with something that's purposeful in our lives, it can drive us to all sorts of things we may never have even considered if we walk aimlessly across the earth and never really understand, hey, what am I doing here? Why am I here? What do I want to do with this opportunity I have that's called life? And so I think mission is really important, mission connected to purpose. And then I paused for a moment because I was thinking, I wouldn't want a child to kind of crystallize that and make it, this is it, and that's it too early on, because I think kind of across the lifespan, we can continue to learn, develop, change, adapt, grow. And if we close that down on this is my thing, then maybe we're not open to how that may advance. So I think a mission and a purpose can evolve. But I do think having a sense of what is it that I want to do, and asking and hopefully trying to answer to some degree in stages of life the question, why? Why do I want? So using the example we were talking about there for a while, I want to be the star athlete. Okay, cool. Why? I don't know. There could be lots of answers for that, but I think that's really helpful for anyone to understand, including a child as they're growing. Why am I doing that? So, I'm tired today. I don't feel like going to practice. Okay, so let's talk about your mission. Well, my mission is to be the star player. Okay, so maybe you even have the natural ability to just be like one of the best on the team because you've got the natural ability and the physique to do that. Great. Do you think not going to practice is going to help that? And by the way, I'm not playing out the answer here. Maybe the answer is yes, and maybe the answer is no. Maybe the answer is I can take a day off today because we play every day, we practice every day. Okay, but maybe it's not. Maybe I'm just being lazy. That's a discussion that I think a parent, a caregiver can help a child to have that discussion and think for themselves about what may play out. And that kind of discussion, I think, can be something that's replicated across life. And that can be a helpful thing to face up to with oneself. That's one way I'm thinking about mission.
I love that, because what I've noticed a lot, especially, so like I had a conversation with one of Maria's cousins on Sunday, and he was talking about, look, like I don't know what I want, like I love sports, and he's talking about like where he wanted, like he wants to do professional, like he wanted to do professional sports and stuff like this, but he doesn't see it happening. And then like the conversation, like typically, you've had this experience too, probably, is like, all right, let's find something that makes some good money, let's find something. And it's like, huh, like I know that doesn't resonate with me. And I just started asking him, like, kind of like the conversation we've had, like, what are the things that you like maybe you can be a professional athlete, you don't see yourself being that, but would you like to be in sports? And maybe it's not sports, but maybe do you like the physical stuff? Like, do you like training people? Do you like exercise science? Do you like strength coach? Or maybe do you like specifically sports? They're like, yeah, like I like sports. Like, okay, like, do you like, all right, there's a bunch of other things. What are some other interests you have? Journalism, newscast. Do you like being in the analyzing things? Do you want to coach? Like, what are some things? And to me, it's just so interesting. Like right now, it's like a lot of the questions I get from my clients too are like, I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what my passion is. It took me 10 years to figure out coaching, but I think it was also 10 years of kind of like going into the exit and then exiting the wrong exit and then doing the same loop. Like I was kind of circling around coaching for so long. I'm curious, like for you and your kids, like again, like how are you bringing mission to them? And it's not just, again, I love what you said, not pigeonholing, like this is what it's supposed to look like and this is what it is for the rest of our life. And I think I know I felt, you and I met, that I had like a certain idea, like, all right, this is what I'm going to be coaching for storytellers. And it was like, I kind of felt bad. I was like, oh, I want to change it. And I was like, oh, but I kind of committed. And I've said it to so many people. I was like, oh, let me change it anyways. And then I'm curious for you, how have you been helping your kids with mission?
I think it's still open-ended for my daughter. And for my son, I think, he started to say, hey, he's moving in this direction of it's something around. At one point, for him, it was, I guess I kind of pulled it as a real example. I mean, he was really about the sport, right? It was about sport. And as he's dove into certain things that are, internships and working with people, he's getting exposed to different things. He's kind of changed a little bit. He's really into a marketing piece now. But even that, now he's kind of stepping over and saying, hey, I think sales is really important and understanding that. And so I do my best to try to listen, but also to try to make it, there's a phrase I use, often with people, with clients, with my family, and it's simple. It's so what? And I don't mean that in a negative or judgmental way, but I mean, so what? To what end? It goes back to this idea of mission, right? So what? Okay, so you think you need sales. So what? For what purpose? What's that going to do for you? Why do you want to do that? What will that help you to do? And a lot of times that creates a conversation. And so with him, he's able to say to me, well, this is what I think it'll do, and this is why I think it'll matter. And my gut instinct is to jump on that and say, oh, well, there's this, that, the other thing. Here's what you should be thinking about. Here's what you should do with that. And I've learned over time to pull that back and hold it. But I got to tell you, that's not easy. I'm still wanting to dive in a lot and say, hey, you ought to be thinking about this. You ought to be trying to do that instead. But I think that's partially, one, his choice, and partially, two, his learning to have, more important than my saying, this is what it should be. And I think everybody doesn't have that. Some people have that. Some people have very directed guidance, if you will. I think it's important to kind of learn from that more on your own, because I think that helps you. That's something that can carry you on. Don't get me wrong, though. I think if people have guidance, have mentors, have bosses, parents, whomever, who can give them direction, awesome. I love that. But I also think there's something to be said about figuring it out for yourself. Even if you get that direction, you have to make the choice. And so part of what I'm doing is trying to help create the context for that conversation, having it, but then stepping back and not making the ultimate, here's what it should be.
I love it. And the reason I asked it, because I think there's a part of this conversation, this specifically, that I think would help a lot of men really just serve their children and show up for them in this way of, like, again, like purpose. Like, how can I help you do the thing that you want to do? How can I, and not just the thing, but like feel the way that you want to feel about the work that you do? How can I help you in that way? And I think it sounds like you've tapped into a lot of the things that I think that I agree with, and that I know I've helped other people do the same. But I feel like your son is kind of on that path of feeling the way that he wants to feel about the work that he does. So I did want to recap just to make sure, like, because again, we go this conversation here and here, but here's some things that I picked up from what you've said. Please let me know if I'm missing anything or if I misinterpret anything. It's like, look, my kids, they have the freedom to choose what they want to do, pursue what they want to do, and I'm going to guide them, and I'm going to have, like, look, there's an ocean of things to do, but here are a couple rivers that I think is like, here's some things to keep in mind. Like, what are the other outcomes that you want to achieve, like monetarily, time wise, quality of the work, like how you feel. Like, keep in mind, like, the basic things that are really that are also gonna just help you, like finances, what's going to pay you enough. At the same time, it's like, okay, like, there's a cool sense of questioning of, like, so what? How is this going to serve what you ultimately want to do? Not in a condescending way, but it's like, how is this going to serve you in your ultimate thing? Is like, yeah, it could be something that you like to do, but like, so what if it's something that you like to do? Maybe it's something, how is it going to serve you in a bigger sense? And also, like, why that? And I think the beauty of those two questions is, I know for me, I need to get things out of here. I need to write it. I need to put it on paper, because if it stays here, it's always fuzzy. It's always hazy. So I practice writing down my thoughts all the time. And when it comes to your reasons why, I know for me, it's sort of like, let me question the thing that I want. Why do I want to be a passionate husband? Why do I want to be a loving husband? Because I want Maria to never feel like she's bored in our relationship. I don't want her to feel like I'm bored with her. I don't want her to feel like she's unattractive. I don't want her to feel like we haven't, like, had any cool memories. Like, I want her to remember laughter. I want us to remember good times. Like, I'm writing down the things that I want to. I want our kids to see how a man chooses his wife every single day. I want our kids to see how a man treats another person, not just their mom, but also like a friend, but just in general. It's like me questioning, why do I love my wife? Why? And, like, again, simple things like, yeah, she supports me. There's another hat I was going to wear that says Coach Andres. She got that to me as soon as I got certified as a coach. Like, these are little thing, not little thing, but these are a couple of the things for why I love her. Let me ask that question to myself so I can really hone in on it. For your son, it's like, why do you want this? Why is this so important for you to spend so much of your time for? It's not a questioning, like let me question you, but it's almost like in service of how can I help you feel even more motivated, more convicted towards this thing that you're doing, so you understand why you're doing it. And along with that, you even mentioned all right, these are some of the things that you want to do. Do some internships, try some different courses out. Ask yourself the questions like, okay, how, like, what else, what other skills do I need to develop to make this happen? In your son's case, like, it was marketing. He talked about sales. Um, that's everything I got so far. It sounds kind of like I'm trying to like put it in a layout, kind of like a blueprint for other men to kind of like follow and understand. Am I missing anything there? Did I misspeak on anything?
You did a great summary, Andres. I'd say two things. So not that you missed them at all.
Hmm.
On one hand, I think there is something to be said about recognizing there's systems and structures and processes that anybody is going to face out there in the world. And so I don't want to make it as if those don't exist. I don't think I did, but I didn't speak to them direct. So I want to acknowledge they're out there. Some of those are against us as individuals, us as groups, us as people. So I think again, back to the idea of mission, it's important to sometimes acknowledge them, to learn them. Sometimes rules can be broken, can be extended. You can work the system a little bit, and sometimes you can't. And if you can't, that's okay. That's again why if you've got mission, you say, you know what? I'm not going to work through this system. I'm going to sidestep over here and go around or go this way. Or maybe it's going to change, adapt, or reorient my approach. And that's important too. I want to acknowledge that. That's one thing. The other thing I'd say is this, and I'm listening to the conversation. It was great hearing you summarize it. And I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty cool. If I go back now a bunch of years again and I say, hey, can I say some of the things I'm saying today? I don't know. I don't know if I could, meaning it sounds good today. It sounds confident. I sound grounded in it. And I think I am. But again, if I'm going back years and I'm talking, or if I'm talking to younger men that are out there, younger than I am, earlier in my life, earlier in my career, maybe my kids are a little bit younger, would I be able to say the same things? I don't know. But here's what I would say, or maybe if I'm coming to it with less understanding than I have today, would I feel as confident speaking like I do? I think it's important to recognize wherever you are at in life as a man, whatever experiences you have, and they may not be good ones, you can still have a perspective and you can make a difference. And what you share can be something that can have impact on your children, and that matters. The question is, are you willing to open up to do that? And I don't care what your experience is, good, bad, otherwise, what your knowledge or understanding is, if you can share that perspective, it can have an impact on your children. And I think that's an opportunity.
It's funny, as soon as you said that, and if I were to ask myself why, like, the question I would ask is, why would that be important to you? What is your mission? So what if you did that? What would it mean to you if you did kind of open up that closet that you kind of don't want to, and that kind of has the skeletons in there that you don't want to show? How would it benefit someone if you did? Maybe just a peek, or maybe just kind of like tiptoe in there and like kind of present a PG version of it, or just a general version, but at least talk about it. Who knows? That's what I love about these that's what I love about this podcast and these conversations, is like every man has his own experience.
Yeah.
Everyone has different lessons. We're more similar than we are different, but at the same time, it's like, okay, like there's so many ways to get to number 4. 2 + 2, 8 - 2. I mean, 8 - 4, 2 times 2 is like, there's not one way to do it. But at the end of the day, we all want what's best for our kid. And
Yes.
I love it, brother. And I want to respect your time. This is some cool stuff. I guess a few questions. What is some advice that you would have? What is a piece of advice that you would tell the man who maybe puts work over time with his kids? What is something that you'd And he wants to be more of a present father, but he feels this focus like, look, I just got work, I got promoted, I'm vice president, like I work 12, 13 hours a day, sometimes on the weekends. What is some advice that you'd like to give him?
I think ask a question is that serving how you want to show up as a father and how you want to be as a father to your family, to your children? Maybe they'd answer that and say, yeah, that's how I want to be. I want to show them it takes hard work. Again, I gave you my own personal examples. But I think that's up to each individual to figure out. But I think you have to ask the question is, does that serve the way I want to be there and show up and influence? And that's the choice somebody has to make.
For the dad who doesn't get to see his kids as often, maybe he's separated from the mother of his children, maybe he lives in another country, another state, maybe he just doesn't, he didn't have that relationship with them and he's kind of struggling to have that relationship with them, but he wants to. What is some advice that you would give him?
Two things I'd say. One is more literal than the other. And one would be, so there's lots of forms of communication, right? So I get it if you don't have the connection, if you're in a different country, if whatever it is that separates you. But I'd ask, are there ways, if you want to communicate, that you could, through writing, through some form of social media, through some form of other communication, texting, right? That's one literal way. The other way is to think, going back to intention. Maybe you haven't made or brokered, or you're unable to make the connection right now. Maybe there is no way to text or to, across social media or to call. How would you like to create that opportunity of relationship if you get it? What will that look like? Maybe you need to do the work for that first. And by doing so, you were talking about a little bit earlier, you said, oh, wow, whatever you see is real, right? Whatever literally in a physics perspective, that's like a quantum collapse of the wave. It makes it real, right? Mm-hmm. But the idea of what would you like that relationship to be? How would you, maybe you need to write about it yourself first. Maybe you need to get clear about it in your own head. So that if and when that opportunity really presents itself someday, you're ready to go with it, versus you've just been thinking about it all along, but you've never really done the work or prepared to actually engage in it.
What would you say to the kid who probably doesn't have that great relationship with his dad, and he or her want to heal that? They want to feel better about it. What would you want to tell them?
Well, let me ask a follow-up question. Is the idea that they won't really be able to have contact with the dad themselves as well?
No. I mean, let's say they can.
I'd say two things. Number one goes back to something we talked about already, but I'd be looking inside first. I think to know oneself is one of the most important things we can do, because before we can go out and interact with other people in the world, we have to know what makes ourselves tick so that we can be connected in the best way we want to be and show up in the way that we want to show up. So I'd say to that kid, what's going on inside of you? Like, let's get under that first. Let's understand, what is it that you want? What is it that you see? How do you feel? What is it that you're experiencing? That's first. But then I'd say if the opportunity arises and the interest is there to engage whoever that father might be, how do you want to frame that? What do you want to say? And by the way, that may be expressing some real negative emotion. That could be anger, resentment, concern. And I'd say create that so that you could put that out there as well, because sometimes to share that, to emote it, to bring it out is almost very purging and relieving. Otherwise, I'll just say this, Andres, otherwise, a child can carry that well into the rest of their lives. And it
Yeah.
just plays out in ways again and again and again as an adult, and then transfers sometimes down to their kids.
Yeah. No, that's 100% true. What is something that you would like to tell the new dad? Maybe he's expecting, maybe he's a couple weeks in, maybe a few months in. What is one piece of advice you'd like to give him?
That'd be simple. Just be you. There's no right. Nobody has the expert answer. Maybe lots of people say they do. They have the expert answer. That's your child. You're the father. Do your thing. Be the best you can be, and that's good enough.
And this last question, this is not for me. It's not for any of the fathers listening out there. But what would you like to tell your two kids?
That's again simple. I mean, I hope that many of your players on the pod answer in this way, but I would just say I love my kids to the end of time. I love my family, and I would always want them to know that. That's part of my mission. That's part of what drives me.
I love it, Dad.
I'll say one last thing, Andres, which is this, not to answer that question, but as we started today, you could have come on with a whole bio of who I am and who each person is who you have a conversation with about this and that and who they've been and all their credentials. We didn't do that. I love that. I think that's great because you know what? I'm just like any other guy, any other dad that's out there. We're all just people trying to do the best we can do. And I think that's what's important to recognize. And I appreciate the opportunity to do that with you here.
Thank you. And thank you for highlighting that, because I think it's something I stumbled upon. Like, again, I don't want, this isn't a flashy thing for me. This is my computer in my mom's living room in her condo. Like this is never gonna be a flashy thing where I'm like, oh, like, let me get a heavy hitter here. Like, oh, like this guy's made, like, I don't care. This is me talking to another man who's a dad, and me hearing what he's got to say, because every dad has something to teach. So I think that's why you're here. I got a lot. I've learned a lot. This is selfish. This whole thing is also selfishly for me. Like, oh, let me learn from the dads who are doing it. So when I'm a dad, I got discounted downgraded decades into days. So I got my education in. So
it was absolutely, it was awesome to connect. I'll end on this note, which is sharing something you and I were sharing before we got going, which was, I sent this message out to another guy the other day, something he said, and I said, oh, that's awesome. And I responded with a red heart, and he wrote me back and he said, I love it when a man can send me a red heart. There's nothing wrong with that. It just shows the appreciation and the love for what we said back and forth to one another. And I love that too. I think that's awesome.
Here.
There you go.
Send you a red heart, man. Thank you, brother. Love having you here. Love you, man. And again, thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for having the conversation, Andres.